This week's guest is Jonathan Royle. Jonathan is a practitioner and trainer of hypnotherapy, neurolinguistic programming, stage hypnosis, and mind control mentalism. He's the author of over 30 books, and his latest book is entitled Shitnosis, helping you get over the shit in your life and get your shit together. Jonathan, welcome to the show.
Hi Matthew, thanks for asking me on. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thanks. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. Yeah, just excited to that book's just launched that you kindly just mentioned, and trying to get the message out there to people that, you know, if they've got, excuse the language, I'm not swearing for the sake of it, and in truth, you know, it's that generally a used term in everyday life. I don't really consider it swearing anyway. If they've got shit going on in their life, they don't need to. There's things that they can do to change things. So yeah.
And so everyone has a kind of path that they're started on in life, and some people have a path that's maybe just they go to school, and then maybe they'll get a job, and then maybe they get a promotion, maybe another promotion, and then retire. But you've had an interesting story right from the beginning, because I understand you were born into a circus performing family. Is that correct?
Yeah, some of this sounds completely batshit crazy, and it also sounds. I can understand how to an outsider it could sound like complete and utter fabricated bullshit, which is why at the off, and this is not a marketing plug, I'll just say that my career resume is online on a webpage. There's nothing for sale there. It's just literally my career resume and life kind of bullet points of stuff in my life that there are then links to evidence to prove that it's real. Because it's that batshit crazy, and that's all on magicalguru.co.uk, where you can see photographic evidence, links to legal evidence, because stuff that's happened in my life, I look back, and to be honest, if it hadn't happened to me, I wouldn't believe it either. And yeah, as you correctly said, Matthew, it started, well, on the 13th of August 1975, whilst my parents were travelling with Gandhi's Circus here in England. And I was born while they were travelling. My dad was performing as a circus clown under the name Tizzy the Clown, and also doing a yogi fakir. That's Fakir, if anyone misheard me. I didn't swear. Fakir act, which is like lying on bed of nails, going up ladder of daggers, fire eating, and all that kind of crazy stuff. And my mum was doing a wild west sharpshooting cowgirl act. And as is the thing on the circus, it is customary to teach each other your skills, so that, you know, if somebody's injured, the show can carry on. The show must go on, as the old saying goes. And it's also customary to get kids involved in the show as young an age as possible. So as a result of that kind of tradition, at the age of 3 and a bit in December, it was around November, December time, 1978, I made my public debut as Flap, F-L-A-P, Flap the Clown, with my dad Tizzy. Hence, you know, there's that old saying, if people are getting a bit stressed out or something, they're getting a tizzy. Or some people say, oh, that person's got themselves in a flap. Hence it was Tizzy and Flap the Clowns. And yeah, I started performing November, December time, 1978. And here we are now recording this, 12th of February 2023. And my life has been, in a lot of regards, one massive theatrical drama and performance. Not just when I was supposed to be performing on stage in front of an audience, doing whatever I was doing by that point in my life, which we'll come to in a minute, because I stopped doing the circus clowning for good reasons to me anyway, by the time I was about 10. But I've always performed in one way or another, because from that very early age, I was twice a day often, you know, 2 times a day, 6 days a week, quite often, hearing an audience applaud or laugh at the right times or cheer or whatever, and that can become a very addictive drug. You'll hear, you know, performers, rock stars, actors saying, you know, that the place where they feel most alive is on stage, getting that love and appreciation, you might say, from an audience. And I became addicted to that from a very early age. And it became somewhat more important to me as an escape, because by the time I was about 6, my mum, who didn't come from a show business background, decided that she wanted me to have more of a normal upbringing, whatever normal is, you know, just a perceptional thing, isn't it? The word normal.
So normal to you, obviously, at that point, normal to you is being on the circus. I guess, did you even perceive at that time that that wasn't normal in those earliest years? Or did you know very quickly that it wasn't normal?
Well, once I became 6 and a bit, and my mum decided that she wanted me to have an apparently what she perceived to be normal, based on her upbringing kind of life, and demanded that we buy a house and I go to a normal school in one place rather than travelling town to town. And then consequently that meant that I couldn't travel with the circus, so I could only perform in the evenings, at weekends, or in the school holidays if the circus was near enough, or as I grew older doing my own little local shows. It was then that I very quickly realised that to most people, what I'd been experiencing on the circus wasn't perceived to them as being normal. But you're quite right. To me, it did seem normal, despite the fact that before this point of getting to the age of 6, which we'll come back to in a minute, on the circus, I'd had the most bizarre experiences. And yet to me, just like, oh, this is what happens if you're on the circus, because I didn't know any different. So what do I mean by bizarre? Well, this is some of the batshit crazy stuff. At the age of 4, I was playing hide and seek on the circus with the other kids who travelled with the circus. And I went and hid under what I didn't quite realise at the time was the Lion Tamers trailer, the Lion Tamers caravan. And unbeknownst to me, until I got underneath it, underneath the trailer was chained up a puma, a wild cat. And this wild cat, the puma, was somewhat surprised to see me crawling under, and some may say attacked me, some may say decided to play with me. But in any event, the upshot was that I've now got claw scars all over the top of my head, down my back, and my left ear, which I'm practically completely deaf in, so I now have a hearing aid. Well, I've had that for a while now. Was ripped off and had to be surgically reattached, and is now somewhat smaller than my right ear, because it didn't, considerably so, didn't grow right. Now, that was traumatic, of course it was, but, you know, it probably wasn't as traumatic as it could have been if I had a perception that this was something bizarre and unusual. Because things become even more traumatic when you perceive them as out of the ordinary, bizarre, or unusual.
So that wasn't the point at which your mother decided maybe you shouldn't do this anymore. This was earlier
bizarrely.
Than that, you got attacked. That didn't stop her.
No, bizarrely. I don't think she was best pleased, like, but, you know, no, bizarrely, it still took a bit longer. And then when I was 5, in England, we have, for anyone listening to this outside of England, you can go on YouTube and search Brooke Bond, that's BROOKE, Brooke Bond, PG Tips, T-advert, chimpanzees. And you will find adverts that were run on British television in the 70s and 80s, even into the early 90s, of the Brooke Bond PG chimps, these chimpanzees that they dressed up like humans and they dubbed voices onto them and had comedy sketches going. Well, these came on tour with Gandhi's Circus in circa 1980, and we actually did a theatre tour with the circus rather than just in the circus tent. And Billy Day, their trainer, would, after they'd performed, walk 2 of the chimps back His assistant had walked some of the others back, but he'd be holding the hand of a chimp in each of his hands. And at the same time as he's walking them back to the dressing room, my dad and me are making our way to the wings, the side of the stage, ready for going on for our next bit after the act that's currently on stage. So we'd always cross the path of Billy Day and two of these chimps. And Billy would invariably say to my dad, "Hi, Tiz." And, knew him as Tizzy the Clown. And my dad would turn and say, "You're right, Billy." And in that moment, in that split second, the chimp nearest to me would always whack me around the side of the head. Quite often, 2 shows a day, that had happened. 6 days a week. Now, I found out since...
And they can do some damage.
Yeah, I found out since that it was just being playful, otherwise I'd have ended up with brain damage or knocked unconscious or possibly killed. That they have that much strength. But because I was, they were a chimp, but I was only like 5, I was probably about its height, and it was just playing with me, I'm assured, and I believe that to be the case with what I now know, because I don't think I suffered any brain damage. Others may disagree with that. So that happened when I was 5, but it still took till I was 6 for my mum to decide that we should get a house, bizarrely. So we did, and I started going to a normal school and just doing shows at weekends and after school and school holidays and whatnot. But very quickly at that school, well, shortly after I started, the Daily Mirror British newspaper ran an article about me, headed Alex, because that's my birth name, Alex, but my stage name is Jonathan Royle now. Alex the Circus 6-hit. And there was a picture of me as Flap the Clown. And people can see that on magicalguru.co.uk if they want to see the embarrassing photos. And the moment that appeared, the teachers probably worked out that on a pro rata basis, I was earning more money than them. Now, I mean hourly rate basis, but obviously I wasn't working anywhere close to the number of hours they were. So God knows why they were jealous or whatever, but for some reason, whether it was just the media attention I was getting or what, I genuinely don't know. All I know is that from the moment that appeared, which was very shortly after I started at that school, the teachers started to make my life a living hell. Bullying, victimising, persecuting, criticising, and so much so that I was begging my mum to change. I wanted to change schools, but there wasn't any other schools in this village, and it took until I was about 7.5, about 18 months, until my mum was able to buy a house in a different town, where we then moved to, and I started at a different school there, and I'm delighted to say that any bullying from teachers just, boom, immediately ended. The teachers at that school, St Luke's in Hayward, were absolutely fantastic. The headmaster, by this time my hobby, I was performing as a clown, but my hobby was magic and conjuring tricks and mind reading and stuff like that. And the headmaster at the school there, Peter Badley, what a wonderful man. He'd go on holiday and he'd come back and he bought me this magic deck of cards. And he said, "I've got you these, but there's one condition, you have to do some tricks in the school assembly." And I'm like, yeah, great, of course I will. So yeah, no, the teachers wise, it was a fantastic environment. Unfortunately, a number of the pupils at that school took over the role of the bullying. Once they discovered I was a circus clown, came from a circus family, and was, in their perceptional eyes, the odd one out, who didn't come from a normal family working 9 to 5 type of background. And whoever said sticks and stones will break my bones but names will never hurt me was talking complete and utter bullshit. Words can be like weapons, and it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. When you get that repeated persecution and bullying on a daily basis over months and years, as I did, and it took a very negative effect on my mental health.
And then at that time, so are you, at this time obviously you're facing that bullying at school, are you wanting to do the performing, or are you seeing that that's the reason you're getting bullied so you actually don't want to do it, or did you enjoy doing the performing and the magic?
great question, and I had very conflicting internal arguments going on, because my logic was that if I wasn't being a circus clown and didn't come from that kind of background, then I probably wouldn't be getting bullied, was the logic I had. But by this point, I'm very addicted to an audience clapping, laughing at the right times, cheering at the right times, and making me feel appreciated. And in fact, not only is that where I feel alive, but also it kind of helps balance out the negativity that I'm feeling when I'm at school.
So you're getting these kind of highs and lows. You're feeling very low at school. You're getting bullied, but then maybe on an evening you're getting clapped by an audience. So it's a very conflicting feeling for you. Whether that's so, did you feel like at the time? Because obviously there's a bit of a debate in generally about child performers and these kind of things about whether they're actually choosing to do what they want to do. Did you feel like at the time you were choosing to be a performer, or was it an expectation from your family?
I don't know. I suppose when this conflict started going on, I probably did start thinking in terms of I had no choice in this because I was born into it and stuff. However, then I kind of took control of it, where between the ages of 8 and 10, I can't remember the exact age to be honest, but it was certainly after the age of 8. It was nearer to the age of 10. We'll go with 10, because I know that there's on magicalguru.co.uk, there's video footage of me on a TV show at the age of 8 still clowning, and I know there were some press cuttings when I was 9 clowning, so it must have been when I was 10. By that point, I rationalised to myself that the bullying might subdue if I stopped being a clown. So I refused to perform as a clown anymore and stopped being Flap the Clown. Now, Flap did make a reappearance a number of years later, very briefly for a few shows, but generally speaking, Flap was kind of killed off by the time I was 10.
And what was the reaction to from your family of saying that you're not going to do what was in the family business anymore?
Well, it was a bit more complicated than that. Could I just turn around and say, I'm not going to perform as Flap the Clown anymore, but I'll still perform in the shows quite happily, which is when I started using the stage name Alex-Leroy, with what by then I'd put together proper professional standard magic acts. I'd put together an act, an illusion act where I could, do things like sawing a woman in half and all that kind of stuff, and an act where I produced doves and birds and did various visual magic tricks. So I wasn't refusing to perform, but I was refusing to perform as Flap the Clown, because I still wanted to perform to get that audience appreciation and love, you might say, that was lacking elsewhere, or felt like it.
So at that time, where obviously you're still very young at this point, where are you seeking this inspiration to have a magic act? Are you seeing magicians who are performing alongside you? Are you seeing this on television, or?
Well, that started probably when I was about 4 or 5, around circa 1980, because for a brief period of time we took a short break from travelling with the circus. We went back to it, but a short break, because we were engaged, my dad was, to act as kind of a carnival sideshow barker, the person who said, roll up, walk this way, come inside, and gets the passers-by's attention, for the Paul Daniels Magic Museum, which was on the Golden Mile in Blackpool. And this was, people are paid to go inside, and there'd be videos running of Paul Daniels doing stuff. There'd be props he'd used on television, because he was just becoming a major famous name at the time. And money I was earning helping my dad on the front perform the neck guillotine, where you apparently penetrate somebody's neck with this sharp blade. We did that to get attention, and then said, go inside to see more, and they paid to go inside. Well, I was spending elements of my money on buying the magic tricks that were on sale in the exhibition. And that really sparked my interest. And obviously, I was watching Paul Daniels on television, and that is what sparked it. And I'd been studying it ever since. So by the time I got to being just before I was 10, I'd studied sleight of hand. I'd been fortunate to, get advice of Paul Daniels in person and other magicians that I'd met at magic conventions. And I developed acts by that point, so that was already there on standby. So it was, fortunate in terms of me being able to carry on performing, but from a psychological point of view, rationalised, stopped doing the clowning, which I figured was the problem. Now, as it happened, the bullying still continued when I was doing the magic. It wasn't quite as bad, but it still happened. And in fact, it still caused that internal conflict and can refer to as depression, really.
You thought this was going to solve the issue, was you're not going to be a clown anymore, so this is going to change, and it didn't.
It didn't. And by the time, before I was 12, before I started at high school, one winter, fall time, for those in America who might hear this, where it goes darker quicker, it suddenly crossed my mind, if I lay down in the middle of Queen's Park Road, the busiest road in Haywood, the big trucks came down it and everything. I just figured, without being too graphic, that all that internal pain and conflict to be over and done with in next to no time. And I did lie down in the middle of the road. And bizarrely, I was there for what seemed like forever. But as I've now discovered, time's very relative, because you can see somebody you've not seen for years, be sat with them for what feels like 5 minutes, then suddenly look at your watch and realise 2 hours has just gone like a snap of the fingers. Or conversely, you could go, you're having a job appraisal with the boss, and you think you've been in the office for like an hour, and you walk out and you've only been in 5 minutes. Time is a weird perceptual construct. It felt like forever, but I was probably only there for 30 seconds, a minute, or whatever. It was still bizarre, look, and no traffic came along. Anyway, I got fed up and stood up and made my way back to the pavement, and I put my foot on the sidewalk, for American listeners, the pavement, and in that very moment, that very second, I suddenly heard a whoosh, and I felt a massive draft, and I turned and looked, and a big, massive articulated lorry had just gone past, and basically split-second difference, and I wouldn't be here. And in that moment, not only did I shit myself, but I suddenly thought to myself, whoa, there must be a better way of sorting this out. There must be a better way. And since then, I've seen stories online and in magazines of people who tried to end it all by jumping out of multi-storey buildings, and a number of them survived. And consistently what they've all said is the reason they tried to end it all by jumping out of the buildings was because they felt there was way too many problems in their life. But then when they jumped out of the building and they're hurling towards the floor, they realised they only had one problem. And that one problem was they just jumped out of a multi-storey building. And it kind of wakes up the mind and makes you think there's got to be a better way of dealing with this. And that's what started my quest to find a solution to that depression, to that feeling, negativity, to be able to change that voice inside my head that by now was repeating what the bully said, saying you're not good enough and all this. Because not only was I getting bullied for being, the odd one out, as it were, but also, just to add insult to injury, I also had ginger hair, which made me another target for bullying at school. I refer people to what I think is an incredibly funny but also clever song by I've just had a mental block.
Are you thinking of Tim Minchin?
Tim Minchin, that's it. It's called Prejudice.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, if you go on YouTube, people, and you search Prejudice...
Don't spoil it, because you just have to watch it. Yeah.
You've got to watch it. It's called Prejudiced. And, well, it'll bring a smile to your face, but I suffered prejudiced. And, so I'm about 12 in the chronology here at the minute. So, by this time, I've outgrown, years ago, I'd outgrown all the books in the conjuring magic trick section of the children's section of the library. And my mum had managed to get me permission off the librarian to take books out from the adult library because, basically I showed them a couple of magic tricks and they were like, right, yeah, we see what you mean. You might need, more advanced stuff. And we used to order them in as well from Manchester Central Library, where they had ones that proper magic companies used to sell. There was a magic company in England that used to be called the Supreme Magic Company, in Manchester Central Library had all the books they sold. So I could save a fortune by ordering them in. But anyway, I digress. The point is, I was in the library, and under the Dewey Library decimal book numbering system, where the sports and pastimes books were is where they filed the conjuring magic trick books. And to the right hand side, although I'd never noticed up to this point, was where the self-help and popular psychology section was. And one day my eye caught a glimpse of a book spine, and the book spine, the name of the book was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And I thought, whoa, this is it. If I get that book, can I learn how to win friends and influence people? I can influence the bullies to become friends, or at the very least to not bully me. Life will just massively improve. And I thought, that this is it, this is the solution. And I got the book, so I'm 12 and a bit, probably at this time. And spoiler alert, the contents may be great for adults to use with common sense with other adults, but they don't work very well for a 12 and a bit year old with other 12 and a bit year olds. In fact, if anything, it made things worse. However, I discovered a new section of the library. And a couple of weeks later, I saw another book by a French guy called Émile Coué, E-M-I-L-E, Émile Coué, C-O-U-E, who is perhaps most famous for discovering the true power of personal affirmations, positive self-programming, with his phrase, day by day, in every way, I'm getting and feeling better and better. Anyway, I got his book out, and I think it was called The Power of Autosuggestion. Or it might have been The Positive Power of Autosuggestion. Anyway, I get it, and from this I learn that personal affirmation, which I start using in the morning as instructed, when you've just woken up, you've opened your eyes, but you're still half asleep in what is known as the hypnopompic state. And at night time, just before going to sleep, when you started yawning but you're not fully with it, well, that's called the hypnagogic state. And basically that's when the analytical area, critical faculty of the brain, or as I like to refer to it as like the nightclub bouncer that stops negative stuff, or thinks it's stopping negative stuff, from getting into your personal desktop computer, your unconscious, subconscious memory banks, kind of goes for its coffee break. So these positive affirmations of day by day, in every way I'm getting and feeling better and better, can get in and start to have an effect. And it did help give me more resilience and make me feel slightly less depressed. I do have to say that. However, it wasn't perfect, but it was a good start. But what I also did learn from Émile Coué was what he called the law of reversed effort. Or in this day and age, in a thing called neurolinguistic programming, they refer to it as what persists resists, or you get more of what you focus on in life. Now, this works in a couple of ways. One of them, which is the reason why, although millions of copies of books like The Secret and books on law of attraction have been sold, it explains why the vast majority of those people never get the results they desire, is because they're focusing on the wrong things. So, for example, they may be saying to themselves, I am going to become richer. Well, by saying I am going to become is actually, within that sentence structure, drawing attention to the fact that you're currently not. And therefore, you're actually focusing on the fact you're not, you know? And so it's actually more likely that you end up remaining poor, or varying degrees thereof. Anyway, another example is the stage hypnotist, who uses it in a different way. You might get someone to put their hands together and then suggest to them to imagine that the world's strongest superglue is sticking, locking, gluing, welding, cementing, bolting both your hands together, and now just try to separate your hands. And as you try, the more they stick, the more they lock, glue, weld, cement. Well, that word try implies that there is the possibility that it will be unable to separate their hands. So it plants the seed of doubt. And the moment the mind is focused, the unconscious, subconscious mind, on that seed of doubt, it grows and becomes a reality. And thus, a lot of the people then find that they can't separate their hands until the stage hypnotist says otherwise. And another thing I learnt about is what NLP now refers to as pattern interrupts, which effectively is the idea that people have set program patterns that are stored in their personal neck-top computer, their unconscious, subconscious memory banks, and that we pattern match when we go into situations, and that we like go through the filing cabinet of our brain rapidly without realising it to find similar experiences we've had to the one we're currently in, so that we can make sense of it. So when somebody puts their hand out to shake yours, you pattern match you, and your brain goes, ah, I put my hand out, we shake hands, we're saying hello. However, if someone was to put their hand out to shake yours, is what your memory bank tells you, and then as you put your hand out towards theirs to shake it, instead they grab hold of your arm and bring it towards your face, and as it's coming towards your face saying, now just allow your eyes to close, drifting down, sinking down, drifting down, and sleep. What happens is your brain goes, what the effing hell's happening here? This doesn't fit the pattern of what I was expecting to occur. So it causes confusion and disorientation and sensory overload, and places the person in the kind of freeze state, the rabbit in the headlight state of fight, flight and freeze, of what should I do? And in that moment, the nightclub doorman I talked about before, the critical faculty analytical area, kind of nudges out of the way and goes, I can't take you this, I don't know what's going on. And in that moment, you can have an effect directly on putting a suggestion or command into the unconscious, subconscious mind, or as I like to refer to it, the personal neck-top computer. So I combined these things together, and then one day I went to school, I thought I've got nothing to lose, because when the bully comes up to me, pins me against the wall, as by now at high school had become a daily occurrence, and starts giving me verbal insults, and his entourage is laughing, and then he'll, after a while, get fed up, hit me and walk off with them laughing. Thought, nothing to lose, I'm getting hit anyway, shit or bust, let's go for it. So the next day, when he approached me and his hand was coming towards my throat to pin me against a wall, as he started coming, I went, oh, here we go again, you're going to start with your insults and all that. I tell you what, why don't you stop wasting time and just try and hit me now? Go on, try and hit me now. And suddenly I could see, it was like his eyes were glazing over. And he just sort of went silent, looked at me really weird. And I thought, hang on, is this sensory overload that I've read about? The confusion, disorientation, pattern interrupt, all that stuff. And I can only imagine he was thinking, what the fuck's going on here? This isn't what normally happens. And then suddenly, let go of me, started walking off, turned to his entourage and went, follow me, fellas, type of thing. And then turned at me and said, don't effing come near me ever again. Well, I had no intentions of doing, and I didn't. And neither did they come near me. And that was the day when I realised that words, yes, they can be weapons, but they can also, and they can be used for negative, nefarious purposes, which is something I explored more later in life, which we can come to later, mind control side of things. But I also discovered that day that they can be used for massive positive outcomes and life-changing situations. And things got a lot better then. Now, bullying didn't stop completely, but the physical violence pretty much stopped. But I still had people that were jealous and made, verbal insults and stuff over the years. But this had set me on a path. And a sick mind Freud, or Sigmund Freud, as more people might know him by, he of kill your father, fuck your mother fame, once said most therapists become therapists because they're searching for answers to their own problems. And although things had started to get better, I was still wanting to make myself feel even better or more normal, whatever that meant to me at the time. And I saw in a British publication called the Exchange and Mart, in the blue section, because it had different coloured pages. Green was nature, gardening and horticulture, and the blue pages were business opportunities. And I was looking through this one day, and I was I was 13, rapidly approaching 14. And I saw an advert that said, become a diploma-bearing, accredited clinical hypnotherapist and learn the secrets of stage hypnosis. And I thought, wow. So I sent off the stamped addressed envelope. This is pre-internet days. This is early 1989. I get the prospectus, and it turns out at the time it was £125 United Kingdom sterling. But that was quite a lot of money in 1989. Remember, I'm still only 13. I don't turn 14 until August 1989. Anyway, I've got money I've earned from doing my magic shows as Alex-Leroy. So I use this and I get the course and I study it. And then I realise on the exam that it asks for your age. And I think to myself, well, yeah. And I lie and I say I'm 18 because I figure that, they're probably not going to want a 14-year-old in. So I do the exam, correspondence course. I've sent the materials back, then they send the exam, and I send it all in with the coursework. Anyway, a few weeks later, lo and behold, certificate comes through. I passed, and I passed with flying colours, 90-odd%. And I feel fantastic. And I've learned stuff in here to help people overcome their habits, addictions, fears, phobias, panic attacks, anxiety, depression, you name it, all manner of things from A through to Z. But then I start to feel a bit guilty because, I've lied about my age. So I contact Dr. Brian Howard, who set up the Association of Professional Hypnotherapists and Psychotherapists in the 80s. And I say, look, I've got to come clean. I'm only 14, because I was 14 by that point. This was later on in 1989, because I turned 14 on 13th of August that year. And he was a bit angry, but then he went, I can kind of see why you lied. You're right, if you'd have booked 14, we'd have never let you take the course or take the exam. But the point is, you passed it. We can't take that away from you, so he issued me a new certificate with my correct age on. And I became the youngest ever member of the Association of Professional Hypnotherapists and Psychotherapists. And you know what? I was so impressed with that start. I mean, I then developed loads of techniques of my own over the years through decades of experience of helping other people. But I was so impressed with that initial course that got me started that I kind of did a Victor Kiam. Victor Kiam, the American guy who had the electric shavers company, and he was so impressed with the shave that he bought the company. Well, I did a similar thing, and I own the rights on the course and supply it for the APHP that I originally trained with all those years ago. I now offer that course as part of my complete elite hypnosis bootcamp package on ultimatehypnosiscourse.com.
What was your mindset when you saw? So you see this advert in the newspaper. Are you thinking that you don't want to do magic anymore, and are you trying to have a career, or were you trying to look at something that would help you, or what were you thinking at that time?
I think there was a mixture, because there was the stage hypnosis bit appealed to me in the idea of, I've seen a stage hypnotist before, and you see, as a magician, I had to cart around loads of boxes and props and magic tricks, and I'm talking, for some of my illusion shows where, you cut ladies in half, I had a box that I'd put dozens of swords through somebody. We needed a transit van, and it could take literally a few hours to unload and set everything up at a venue before a show. So this was a real ball ache, really. Whereas the stage hypnotist I'd seen essentially just walked on stage with a microphone, got some volunteers, hypnotised them, and had a few funny props to give them for sketches that had fit in a shoulder bag. And I thought, less setting up, less stuff to carry. And my research showed at that time, it's not the case anymore in England, but at that time, generally speaking, all stage hypnotists got paid more than all magicians. Doesn't work like that now. But so there was a lot of attractiveness to it. Carry less work, more profit as a stage hypnotist, plus get the audience appreciation and love that I'm still addicted to. And the therapy side, I thought, well, there might be things I can use on myself. But bizarrely, once I learned them, rather than continuing the self-healing on myself I got distracted helping other people and earning money, but then I started bunking off school, you see, as well. So because I was bunking off school and working in a new age shop doing tarot readings and hypnotherapy sessions, I wasn't getting bullied as much verbally, or even, well, physically it pretty much stopped, but verbally I wasn't, because I wasn't being around the people who'd been doing it because I bunked off school. So I wasn't as motivated to carry on the self-healing processes that I really should have done.
And what was the reaction to someone coming to have a hypnotherapy session with a 14-year-old?
Well, they didn't know I was 14. Although I'd been honest with
at the time.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I've looked at pictures of myself at the time, the way I was dressed, and I look at it and go, you know what? It's damned obvious I'm not 18. But I suppose they wanted to believe. They wouldn't want to think they were paying out money to someone who's 14. All I know is that it worked for them, because such is the power of the placebo. If people believe enough, I mean, that's a different debate altogether. But yeah, I didn't but finish the process on myself. So by my late teens, sort of 17, 18, I was smoking cigarettes, cannabis, taking cocaine, drinking to the level that could only be deemed as being alcoholism, albeit that was a functioning alcoholic, gambling, and just generally living a batshit crazy lifestyle. Because I was, you know, I'd appeared on television as a hypnotist by now, and I was earning really good money. I was doing incredibly well as a stage hypnotist and a hypnotherapist. But I was living that sort of superstar lifestyle beyond the money that was coming in, even though there was enough coming in to live it. It was just excess, ridiculous, a total escape from the negativity, because you did get jealous people coming out of the woodwork. But I just hadn't sorted everything out properly from the childhood traumas. It's the truth of it. And one day I woke up and suddenly it was literally like, I just woke up and went, what the effing hell are you doing? And I didn't buy any more cocaine. I stopped drinking to the level that I stopped these things. And it was literally just a case of literally stop them. Now, that wasn't as easy as perhaps making it sound there, but I did realise that to avoid relapsing, I needed to use the techniques on myself that I'd been using upon clients to help them change their lives. And I finally did the things that if I'd done when I was 14, when I learnt them, I'd have probably avoided going down that rabbit hole of addiction.
And what age are we talking about here when you were in this time period?
So I was 17, 18, 19.
So you're performing hypnosis shows and you're doing hypnotherapy sessions, and the money's coming in, but you're not quite sure how to handle it, and you're having this childhood trauma that you haven't addressed. So you're trying to, rather than turning to those techniques, you're trying to fill it with alcohol and drugs. Is that right?
Looking back on it, yeah, that's what was going on. But then finally, I did wake up and go, hey, hang on a minute, and use the techniques upon myself, which then enabled me to balance things out. Now, what I mean by balance things out is, as I explain in my book, Shitnosis, helping you get over the shit in your life and get your shit together, people quite often, by the time they hit puberty, teenage years, certainly by the time they're 16, no later, but quite often it's more the 13, 14 framework, with what they've gone through from birth up to that point, they're already become emotionally constipated, imbalanced. Something's been chipped away, is missing. Now, as they grow up, they're not consciously aware of this, and there's a reason for that. Well, some people are consciously aware. Some people are aware that perhaps, if they've been unfortunate enough to be the victim of child abuse or total physical violence and stuff, then yeah, they're probably consciously aware of things. For the vast majority, who are fortunate enough not to have gone through those extremes of trauma and negative life events, you still, from birth to teenage years, go through hundreds, if not thousands, of what I refer to as mini traumas. Now, they're only mini traumas from an adult perspective. In fact, from an adult perspective, what I'm about to describe as one example, you're going to go, how could that possibly affect me now as an adult? And you probably find it laughable, the idea. But here's the thing. Let's say you're 3 years old and you're at a birthday party and there's all these balloons and people are playing with them, and you notice there's only one red balloon left and you want it and you grab it. And in that moment, your imagination starts believing it's a spaceman or whatever. Kids, you know, it's a wonderful world of imagination. And this, in that moment, suddenly becomes the most valuable thing on the planet to 3-year-old you. But then suddenly the balloon gets burst. It's popped, it's ruined, it's gone. And the 3-year-old you starts to cry and scream. And the parents, somebody around probably laughs, oh, haha, oh dear, he's popped his balloon. But you think they're laughing at you, which they kind of are, but not in the way that, you know, you're processing it different because you're only 3. But to you as that 3-year-old, that is as traumatic to the 3-year-old you, because that balloon meant the world to you in that moment, as to an adult now it would be losing a loved one, a family member or a friend to an illness. It's a grieving thing. It's a major trauma. And we have hundreds, if not thousands, of these things as we're growing up that from an adult perspective would seem totally insignificant. But at the moment in time when they happened, the way it's perceived through the eyes and the perceptions of the 1-year-old, the 2-year-old, the 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old, up to 16 kind of maximum, I'd say, and then we kind of start developing the critical faculty analytical area properly, or the executive function of the mind, as some psychologists call it, which they would argue probably only is fully formed by about the age of 20. Anyway, I differ with them. I kind of draw a line saying about, you know, teenage puberty. It's all a construct anyway. Anything to do with psychology cannot be proven fully one way or the other. It's just a case of what works best, and for me this seems to have worked, as it were. So we have kind of a metaphoric inner child that's frozen in time. Those traumatic imprints are in our neck-top computer, our unconscious subconscious mind, and they are running telling us we're not good enough, or that we're not capable of certain things, or instilling fear, false evidence against reality in us, so that when we're faced with that option of either facing everything and rising or fucking everything and running, we're more likely to F everything and run because of the negative programs that are running. And I use techniques upon myself that I'd help other clients with to unlock and dissolve the intensity of the negative emotions, feelings, connections and reactions that were connected to those things, but in a manner that can be done in a content-free manner. And what we mean by that is, I am totally against any form of therapy where you have to keep talking about and raking up and digging deep until you remember the traumatic things that happened to you. Because why should you have to relive the trauma? You've already gone through it once. The point is to stop it affecting you the way it has done up to that point. And there are techniques that work really well to enable us to help people to, basically unfreeze that traumatic imprint from that frozen in time moment as a child, help the metaphorical inner child grow up and feel loved and wanted. And by that I mean every human being needs to feel, they might not consciously be aware of it, but they need to feel loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished and valued. Now, they sound very similar, but if you get a thesaurus and check out those words, loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished and valued, they all mean different things. And some of them relate to self-esteem, some to self-confidence, some to self-image, some to self-control, aka willpower. So here's the thing. If from birth to teenage years there's these mini traumas occurring and they get frozen in time, that will have a knock-on effect on some level on how much that person feels loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished and or valued. It's different for everyone. The knocks will be taken more so in different areas for different people. But the point is, if there's any imbalance in one or more of those things, it will have a negative impact on their self-confidence, self-image, self-control and self-esteem. And any negative impact on one or more of them will have a negative impact on their self-love, self-respect, self-worth and positive selfishness, looking after themselves, so then they can be fully in the moment for other people as well. And if there's any negative impact on any of them, ultimately is going to affect their self-identity, the id, ID. Their conscious mind is the ego. Their unconscious subconscious is their self-identity, the inner them, the id. Ego and id, we're back to sick mind Freud again. But there is more truth there than many would care to admit. Anyway, if there's any negative impact on the self-identity in them, it chips away and it kind of makes them feel as though something's missing. There's a gap somewhere. Now, some people will turn to religion to fill that. Some people will turn to drinking to drown it out, those feelings. Some smoke to create a smoke screen. There's all different metaphors. Some eat too much to, to kind of try and fill the gap metaphorically. Point is, it will negatively manifest in some manner until it's dealt with. And the only way to overcome positively and permanently without relapse, habits, addictions, fears, phobias, and to deal with a whole bunch of other things, is to use techniques to unfreeze those mini traumas, to reduce the intensity of any negative feelings, thoughts, energies, emotions or connections of the past, which can be done without mind raping people. We don't have to make them relive things. It can be done in what we call a content-free manner. And then reprogramming their personal desktop computer to kind of give them mental antivirus software for the brain, so they can let go of all that negative shit of the past, all that self-blame, shame, guilt, regret, fear, anger, resentment, remorse they've been walking around with without perhaps even realising it, and instill positive programs for the future in a manner where they end up feeling fully loved, wanted, needed, appreciated, cared for, cherished and valued, and thus in turn end up being balanced in terms of their and feeling whole again in terms of their self-confidence, self-image, self-esteem, self-control, and as a positive consequence, balancing out their self-respect, self-worth, self-love, positive selfishness, and ultimately repairing their self-identity so they feel metaphorically whole again, so that that inner child that was frozen in time can also grow up, so they can function both consciously and subconsciously, at a harmonious, running together, congruent level that allows them to operate at peak performance and achieve whatever they want to achieve in life. And unfortunately, it took me until I was almost 20 to get to that point of using those things to get myself there. Now, don't get me wrong, life still threw up challenges between then and now, and there's times when I've had to go back and use techniques again, because life does throw unexpected things in your path. It's not a magic wand that you do once. That's why even though billions of dollars or pounds worth of self-help and personal development books sell every year, and yet, why do they keep selling that many every year? Because if it was as simple as just reading the book, then surely everyone would now be okay and not need another book. The thing is, the difference that makes the difference is taking out. I'm not saying those books are crap and that my book Shitnosis is better than all of them, although personally, slightly egotistically, I do think it's probably the best self-help book ever released. However, I'll let people decide that for themselves, but what I will tell you is this. If you get a copy of my book Shitnosis off Amazon or any other major bookseller and read it, you know what's going to happen? You'll feel better for a little bit just thinking about the possibility of using the stuff in it, but then fuck all will happen. Because if you do nothing, you'll get nothing. If you keep doing what you've always done, you'll keep getting what you've always got. Something has to change. That's why it's called change work. You yourself have to do something, take some action. That's why it's called self-development or personal development. I will give you all the tools you need in the book Shitnosis, but you actually have to take action and use them in order to actually see the results. I had to do something myself. Now, yes, you could go and see a therapist, but many of these therapists, because they're trying to earn a living, will drag things out over multiple sessions unnecessarily. And it will cost you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars or pounds. Whereas for literally an investment of less than £15 sterling, just £14.70p, you can get Shitnosis by Jonathan Royle. And it's not just a book where you read stuff, there's QR codes in there you can scan that take you to virtual, online, interactive video sessions with me where I demonstrate and talk you through and guide you through the different psychological mind-body healing and recovery processes. And there's stuff in there to cover everything. It doesn't matter whether you've got a habit, addiction, fear or phobia, health issue, chronic pain, depression, anxiety, you name it, whatever you think of, even if it's only wanting to become better at playing golf. Literally anything you can think of can be made more positive and improved when you are running the right mental software in your personal laptop computer. And that's what the whole book's about, and what my life through living it myself became.